The sun barely pierced the dusty clouds of Varel 9, painting the barren colony in dull orange and gray. The wind carried grit that stung exposed skin and made every movement laborious. In the midst of this desolation, a small figure crouched by a pile of broken machinery. She was young, no more than 15 by human standards, with thin limbs and large cautious eyes that darted at every shadow. Her name was Lyra. Lyra had nothing to her name. No family, no home, and no possessions beyond the rags she wore and the few tools she had scavenged. Her people often called her weak, useless, someone who would not survive the harsh world of the colony. But Lyra had learned early that strength was not always measured in muscle or influence. Survival depended on cleverness, patience, and the ability to stay unseen. Today she was trying to fix a small power unit she had found among the discarded machinery of the mining facility. Sparks danced between broken wires as she worked, the device stubbornly refusing to come to life. Her thin fingers trembled from both cold and fatigue, but she refused to give up. Every functional part she could salvage was a step closer to being self-sufficient, closer to feeling like she belonged somewhere. As she wiped sweat and dirt from her brow, a shadow fell across her work. Lyra froze and instinctively curled into herself, ready to flee. But instead of a threat, she saw a man standing there, tall and confident, wearing the uniform of a human explorer. His eyes, a calm gray, watched her without judgment. "You're struggling," he said simply, and there was no mockery in his voice. Only observation. Lyra flinched. Most beings she had encountered would have laughed or ignored her. She said nothing, gripping a loose wire tightly. "May I?" he asked, kneeling beside her. He didn't reach for the device yet. He waited. Lyra blinked, unsure if he meant harm. I don't need help," she muttered. "You do if you want it," he said. His tone was patient, almost kind. That word felt foreign in Lyra's ears. Kind. Humans were often harsh, and aliens like her even harsher. Generosity was rare, almost unheard of in Varel 9. Lyra hesitated. Finally, curiosity got the better of her caution. "Who are you?" "Captain Elias Kane," he replied. "I'm just passing through, observing the colonies. I saw you working. Thought you could use a hand." Lyra narrowed her eyes. A hand? No one had ever offered her help freely. People took what they could or left others to suffer. This man, human as he was, seemed different. I don't know how," she admitted. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "That's fine. I'll show you." He opened a small toolkit and carefully examined the unit. He didn't rush, didn't judge. Instead, he explained each step in simple words, demonstrating how to reconnect wires and patch circuits. Lyra watched intently, absorbing everything. She had learned to rely on herself, but something about his calm presence made the impossible feel possible. Hours passed. The wind rose higher, blowing grit into their eyes and mouths, but they persisted. Lyra's hands were raw, her fingers sore. Yet she felt a strange spark of hope that she hadn't felt in years. Finally, the power unit hummed to life, the faint glow of energy filling the small workspace. Lyra gasped, almost afraid to believe it. It works?" Kane smiled, a small, honest smile. "You did most of the work. I just showed you the way." Lyra felt warmth in her chest, something she hadn't felt in a long time. Gratitude, yes, but also wonder. How could someone do this for her with no expectation? Humans were strange. Perhaps in their strangeness lay their strength. The human stood, brushing dust off his uniform. "I have to leave soon, but if you ever want to learn more, come find me. I have supplies and tools. You could do amazing things if you try." Lyra wanted to ask more, many questions buzzing in her head. But fear and caution held her tongue. I'll think about it," she said. Kane nodded, his gray eyes studying her thoughtfully. "That's all I ask. Think. And remember, sometimes the smallest acts of kindness change everything." He left, disappearing into the dusty horizon. Lyra watched him go, the wind tugging at her hair, the orange sun sinking lower. She felt something shift inside her. She had always believed the world was cold and uncaring, yet here was proof that it could be different. For days after, Lyra couldn't stop thinking about the human and his tools. She scavenged what she could, trying to recreate his methods, but she realized she needed guidance, someone to teach her properly. Her people would never help her. They didn't see value in her. But maybe humans saw potential. She began secretly following the trails Kane had left, learning to move without being noticed, watching from a distance as humans maintained their outposts. She observed their cooperation, their problem-solving, and their curiosity. They were messy and loud, but they accomplished things that Lyra's people only dreamed of. She saw the spark of ingenuity in every human action, and she longed to understand it, to be a part of it. Her clandestine visits were not without risk. The colony was strict about outsiders, and getting caught could have meant imprisonment or worse. But the thought of learning, of growing, pushed her past fear. One evening, after narrowly avoiding a patrol, Lyra found herself at the edge of a human supply depot. She hid behind a mound of rubble, watching humans moving with purpose. Supplies were organized, machines repaired, and no one shouted for dominance or insulted others for failure. Lyra realized that humans saw value where others saw weakness. It was a lesson her colony would never teach, and in that moment she made a decision. She would no longer accept the world as it was. She would learn, grow, and change her destiny. The days that followed were filled with clandestine visits, careful observation, and experimentation. Lyra scavenged what humans left behind, studying the mechanisms, and slowly began creating small devices that helped her survive better. A water filter that reduced the gritty residue, a small mechanical arm that allowed her to lift heavier scrap, even a rudimentary communication device. Every success brought her confidence, every failure taught her persistence. She started speaking quietly to herself while working, imitating Kane's patient explanations. "If it doesn't work this time, I can try again. There is always a way," she would murmur, repeating the words she had heard from the human who had offered her nothing but help. Word began to spread, quietly. Other orphans and outcasts in the colony noticed her small inventions, her daring moves to survive where others would give up. They whispered about the strange, fragile girl who seemed to grow stronger every day, who defied the expectations of her people. Some began to follow her in secret, drawn to the hope she embodied, even if they did not understand it yet. But not everyone approved. The colony's council viewed her actions with suspicion. They saw humans as unpredictable and dangerous, and anyone who admired them was a threat. Lyra heard rumors of patrols looking for signs of her trespassing, and she knew she had to be careful. Yet the more they tried to suppress her, the more determined she became. She had seen what humans could do. She had glimpsed a world where ingenuity, kindness, and perseverance mattered more than lineage or status. That was the world she wanted to live in. One night, after repairing a small generator that powered her hideout, Lyra sat on a rock and looked at the orange-tinted sky. The wind was calmer now, carrying a sense of quiet possibility. She thought of Captain Kane, of the tools he had given her, and the simple kindness that had changed her life. She understood now that generosity was not just giving, it was planting a seed, a belief in someone's potential, even if they could not see it themselves. Lyra whispered into the night, almost as if speaking to Kane, "I will not waste this. I will learn. I will grow. And maybe I can change things." The colony slept unaware of the small revolution stirring among its weakest members. Lyra's hands were covered in grime, her clothes torn, but her eyes shone with a determination that no dust storm could erase. She had nothing to her name, yet she held the greatest power of all, the belief that she could shape her destiny. And somewhere, beyond the horizon, Captain Kane would unknowingly watch the ripple of his generosity take form, not as a single act, but as the beginning of a journey that would alter an entire life, and perhaps one day an entire world. The dust storms of Varel 9 had become almost a rhythm in Lyra's life, yet she no longer feared them as she once did. Each gust of wind and swirl of grit reminded her of how far she had come. She had learned to find shelter, to fix machines, and to scavenge with cleverness that sometimes left even the older orphans in awe. But most importantly, she had begun to believe in herself, a feeling she had never known until the human Captain Kane had given her that small spark of hope. Lyra's days were now filled with careful planning. She would wake before the first orange light touched the horizon, sneak to the outskirts of the mining fields, and observe the humans at the distant outpost. She no longer feared discovery. Instead, she watched and learned. They moved with purpose, repairing machines together, sharing tools, teaching each other without ridicule. Humans thrived on cooperation, something alien to her people, who valued only hierarchy and dominance. One morning, as Lyra worked to reinforce a shelter for herself, and a few younger orphans who had started to follow her. A voice called from the dust-filled sky. "Lyra!" She froze and glanced up. It was Kane. He had returned unexpectedly, his ship glinting faintly under the weak sunlight. Lyra's heart raced. She had never seen him this close again. He stepped down from his transport, scanning the area carefully before noticing her crouched figure. "You're still surviving," Kane said, his eyes soft but observant. "And you've made improvements. Impressive." Lyra straightened, a mixture of pride and nervousness rising inside her. I've been learning," she said. "I watch you and I try to do what I can." Kane nodded, kneeling beside her. "You don't have to just try. You can do. But you must trust yourself as much as you trust the lessons you learn." Lyra studied him. Trust herself. She had never been allowed that luxury. Her people had always dismissed her, reminding her that she was weak and insignificant. But here was a human telling her that she mattered, that she could matter. Something deep inside shifted. Over the following weeks, Kane took her under his wing. He did not coddle her. Instead, he taught her engineering principles, showed her how to plan, to anticipate problems, and to approach challenges with patience. He introduced her to the human's ways of thinking, emphasizing that mistakes were not failures but opportunities. Lyra absorbed everything, her small hands moving with precision, her mind grasping concepts that had once seemed impossible. Back in the colony, her influence began to grow quietly. The younger orphans looked up to her, emulating her persistence and ingenuity. They watched as she repaired old machines to store water, rigged simple systems to conserve energy, and even created small devices that helped carry heavy loads across the mining fields. Each success, though small, built a reputation that the Council could no longer ignore. Then came the first real test of her newfound skills. A massive dust storm approached, larger and more violent than any in recent memory. The Council panicked, issuing chaotic orders that made little sense. Supplies were scattered, shelters unstable, and the younger orphans terrified. Lyra knew she could not wait for help. She had to act. She ran from shelter to shelter, coordinating small groups of children and outcasts, reinforcing structures with her mechanical knowledge. She instructed them to stack materials carefully, to create windbreaks, and to secure loose equipment that could become dangerous in the storm. Her voice carried authority, not from fear or aggression, but from confidence and clarity. Hours passed. The storm hit with a ferocity that rattled buildings and sent sand whipping through every crack. Lyra's hands were raw, her body exhausted, but she moved steadily, checking every shelter, every device she had set up. The younger orphans followed her lead, their fear replaced by trust. When the storm finally passed, the colony was battered but largely intact. The Council, who had hidden in fear, emerged to see the results. Their eyes widened as they witnessed the survival of structures and the children unharmed. Whispers spread quickly. This fragile girl, whom they had always dismissed, had saved lives and preserved supplies. Lyra did not gloat. She only breathed heavily, brushing the grit from her hair and hands, and made sure the youngest were safe. But inside she felt a quiet triumph. She had used what she had learned from humans and her own resourcefulness to accomplish what others had thought impossible. That evening, Kane returned to her hideout. He found her sitting by a repaired generator, exhaustion evident on her face. He smiled, though it was tinged with concern. "You handled that remarkably," he said. "I hope you realize what you just accomplished." Lyra shook her head. I just did what had to be done." Kane crouched beside her. "And yet you did it better than many experienced leaders. You were brave, clever, and calm. That's not something everyone can do." He studied her closely. "Lyra, do you understand why humans help each other? We see potential where others see weakness. We believe that anyone, even the smallest, can make a difference if given the chance." Lyra considered his words. She remembered the day he had first helped her, the day he had given her tools without asking for anything in return. That single act of generosity had changed everything, and now she saw why. It was not just about fixing a machine or surviving a storm. It was about inspiring belief in someone who had none. Days turned into weeks, and Lyra continued to grow under Kane's guidance. She began designing more complex devices, organizing small groups of orphans to maintain water filters and storage systems, and even mediating disputes among children who had grown restless. Her confidence blossomed, and her quiet influence began to ripple further than she expected. The colony, which had once ignored her, started to notice her presence in subtle ways. Adults began to seek her input, if only hesitantly, as they saw that her methods worked. Children followed her eagerly, and even older, hardened workers offered grudging respect. Lyra realized that change did not always come through force or titles. Sometimes it arrived through persistence, knowledge, and care. One evening, while Lyra worked on a new energy storage device, Kane spoke softly. "I've watched you grow these past weeks. You've learned more than most adults ever do. But you must also understand that knowledge alone is not enough. Leadership comes from empathy, courage, and the willingness to take risks for others." Lyra nodded, though she felt the weight of the words. Leadership was foreign to her. She had survived by hiding and by being careful. Now she was being asked to stand in front of others, to guide them, to make decisions that could affect everyone. The thought was frightening, but it also ignited a strange excitement. "Do you think I can do it?" she asked quietly. Kane's gaze was steady. "I know you can. You just need to trust yourself as much as you trust your tools and knowledge." A few weeks later, Lyra faced another test, this time from beyond the colony. A rival mining group from a neighboring settlement tried to seize control of a valuable water source. Their approach was aggressive, and the council panicked, unsure how to respond. Lyra stepped forward. Using the strategies she had learned from humans, she organized a small team to secure the water supply, set up defenses using machinery and simple traps, and negotiated with the rival group using calm and reasoned arguments. Her quick thinking prevented conflict from escalating into violence and protected the colony's resources. The council could no longer deny her abilities. They approached her cautiously, acknowledging her skills, her cleverness, and her growing leadership. Lyra realized that she had not only survived, but had begun to change the way her people saw her. From an ignored outcast, she was now someone others turned to in moments of crisis. That night she sat atop a ridge overlooking the colony, her body tired but her mind racing. The wind had calmed, leaving the stars clearer than they had ever appeared. She thought of Kane, of the human generosity that had sparked this journey. She realized that his act had given her more than tools. It had given her belief. Belief that she could grow, that she could lead, and that she could inspire change in a world that had once dismissed her. For the first time, Lyra allowed herself a quiet smile. She understood that destiny was not given. It was shaped by choices, effort, and sometimes the kindness of strangers. Kane's lessons had shown her one path, but it was her own courage and persistence that would carry her forward. The colony slept below, unaware that a small, fragile girl had grown into a force that could alter its future. Lyra's hands were still rough and scarred, her clothes patched with scraps, but her eyes gleamed with determination. She had begun to see her place in the world, not as a powerless orphan, but as someone capable of real change. And somewhere in the distance, Kane's ship waited, a silent reminder that one act of generosity could spark a transformation that nothing could stop. Lyra's journey was far from over, but she no longer feared what lay ahead. For the first time, she felt ready to face the challenges of her world, armed with knowledge, courage, and the belief that humans had shown her even the smallest life could leave a mark on the universe. Years had passed since Lyra had first met Captain Elias Kane. The frail, frightened girl who once scavenged in the dust of Varel 9 had grown into a confident and capable young leader. Her hands, still marked with scars from hard work, now built machines that others could only dream of repairing. Her mind, sharp and inventive, devised solutions to problems that once seemed impossible. The colony that had ignored her now looked to her guidance in times of need, and the whispers of her ingenuity had spread even beyond the immediate settlements. Lyra walked through the colony's main square, observing the changes. New water filtration units hummed quietly, providing clean water to every home. Reinforced shelters stood tall, protected from the frequent storms. Children played safely in the open areas, their laughter a sound that had been absent for many years. Adults moved with purpose, collaborating rather than competing, inspired by Lyra's approach. She had not only learned from humans, but had adapted their lessons to fit the unique needs of her people. Despite her growth, Lyra remained humble. She never sought power for herself. Instead, she focused on teaching, organizing, and inspiring others. The lessons Kane had shown her, The importance of generosity, trust, and belief in potential had become her guiding principles. She worked tirelessly, knowing that leadership was not about commanding but about empowering those around her. The next challenge arrived unexpectedly. A galactic mining corporation, attracted by rumors of rich minerals beneath Varel 9's surface, sent a fleet of heavily armed ships to claim the planet. The corporate representatives demanded immediate control, threatening destruction if the colony resisted. Panic spread among the council members, who had never faced such an overwhelming force. Many were ready to surrender, but Lyra saw an opportunity to apply everything she had learned. She convened a council meeting, standing before the skeptical leaders. Her voice, calm but firm, carried authority. We do not have to fight them blindly, nor do we have to surrender. We can protect our people, preserve our resources, and ensure the corporation leaves without harming anyone. The council murmured, unsure if a single young leader could face a galactic corporation. But Lyra's reputation, built on years of quiet success, gave her words weight. She outlined a strategy that combined ingenuity, negotiation, and defensive preparation. Mechanical barriers disguised as natural terrain would channel the corporation's forces into controlled areas. Automated systems, built from the machines she had repaired and improved, would protect the water supplies and shelters. And, above all, she would personally lead efforts to communicate and negotiate with the intruders, showing courage and confidence that few expected from someone her age. The preparations took weeks. Lyra worked tirelessly alongside her people, teaching them to operate the defense systems and repair them under pressure. She coordinated patrols and supply lines, ensuring everyone knew their role. Each successful test of a device or strategy strengthened their confidence. Children and adults alike began to trust in her leadership, inspired by her calm determination and her ability to see solutions where others saw only problems. Finally, the corporation arrived. Massive ships descended, their shadows stretching across the colony like a dark cloud. Soldiers and engineers disembarked, their movements precise and intimidating. But Lyra stood at the forefront, flanked by her people ready to act. The negotiations began, tense and cautious. The corporate representatives demanded immediate surrender, dismissing the colony as primitive and unworthy of consideration. Lyra spoke clearly, explaining the unique challenges of the planet, the value of the community, and the ways in which the corporation's interests could be met without harm. She demonstrated their automated systems, showing how the colony could protect its resources while still allowing limited extraction under careful oversight. To the surprise of many, her reasoning, combined with the practical demonstrations, impressed the corporate negotiators. They had expected fear, resistance, or chaos. Instead, they saw a disciplined, organized, and intelligent society capable of collaboration and problem-solving. Slowly, they agreed to a compromise that protected the colony while satisfying their own interests. Lyra's negotiation skills, patience, and innovative thinking had prevented a battle that could have destroyed everything. As the corporate fleet departed, Lyra allowed herself a moment of quiet relief. The colony was safe, and she had proven that even a single person, armed with knowledge, courage, and a willingness to act for the good of others, could shape events on a scale far larger than anyone imagined. Days later, as she walked through the colony's newly expanded center, she heard a familiar voice. "You've done well, Lyra." She turned to see Captain Kane stepping from his ship, older now with streaks of gray in his hair but the same calm, observant eyes. Lyra smiled, a mix of pride and gratitude. "I had guidance," she said softly. "From you." Kane shook his head. "No, Lyra. You had determination, curiosity, and the courage to act. I only helped you see it in yourself. You shaped this world because you believed you could. Generosity, guidance, tools, they are meaningless without the person willing to use them." Lyra nodded, understanding fully now what he meant. The small gift of tools, the act of kindness years ago, had sparked something inside her, but it was her own choices, her own persistence, and her willingness to face fear that had carried her this far. Over the following months, Lyra worked to solidify her vision for the colony. She implemented systems that allowed neighboring settlements to trade and communicate efficiently. Knowledge and technology spread, guided by her careful planning. Children were taught practical skills alongside critical thinking and cooperation, ensuring that future generations would not face the same limitations she had endured. Lyra also established a council of her own, one that valued competence and empathy over lineage or status. Each member brought different strengths, and together they governed the colony with fairness and innovation. Lyra did not rule with authority for the sake of power. She led by example, teaching that courage, cooperation, and generosity were the true marks of leadership. Even as her influence grew, Lyra never forgot the lessons of her youth. She often visited the outskirts of the colony, helping children who reminded her of her younger self, those who were overlooked or dismissed. She showed them that even the smallest contributions mattered, that every individual had the power to change their world if given the chance and the belief to try. One evening, Lyra stood on a ridge overlooking the colony. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the thriving settlement. She thought of Cain, of the humans she had observed and learned from, and of the countless small acts that had led to this moment. A single gesture of generosity had changed her life, but it was her own courage that had shaped her destiny and the future of her people. She whispered to the wind, almost as if speaking to the distant stars, "I will not forget. I will continue to grow, to learn, and to help others." One act of kindness can start a journey, but it is the choices we make that carry it forward. The stars began to shimmer in the clear night sky, a reminder of the vast universe beyond Varel 9. Lyra understood that her journey was far from over. New challenges would arise, new threats and opportunities would appear, but she faced them without fear, armed with knowledge, courage, and the enduring belief in the potential of every life, human or alien. Cain approached her, standing quietly beside her. "You've changed this world," he said, "and perhaps one day you'll help change many others." Lyra smiled, feeling the weight of responsibility but also the thrill of possibility. "I hope so, but I've learned that change begins with one person, one choice, one act of belief in what can be done. That's what humans taught me, even if unknowingly." Cain nodded, placing a hand on her shoulder. "And that's why humanity survives and thrives, because we see potential, even in the most unlikely places." Lyra turned her gaze back to the colony. The streets were alive with movement, with laughter, and with the quiet hum of progress. Children ran with tools and small machines, learning the lessons she had once learned. Adults worked together, no longer constrained by fear or tradition. And everywhere she saw the reflection of one human's generosity, a reminder that a single act could indeed alter the course of a life, and perhaps the destiny of many. As the night deepened, Lyra felt a profound sense of peace. She had come from nothing, with no family, no possessions, and no place to belong. Yet through guidance, courage, and the generosity of a stranger, she had built a life of meaning, influence, and hope. She knew that the future was not guaranteed, that challenges would always come, but she also knew that humanity, its ingenuity, empathy, and willingness to with the stars overhead and the colony thriving beneath her, Lyra allowed herself a moment of quiet triumph. She had become a symbol, not just of survival but of transformation. From the girl who had nothing to the leader who inspired generations, she understood that destiny was not given, it was created. And as she stood on that ridge, feeling the wind carry the distant echoes of the desert storm she had once feared, Lyra smiled. She had nothing to her name once, yet now she had everything: purpose, influence, and the power to change not only her own life, but the lives of all who would follow her. The generosity,